You may tell me, Arabic is not my mother tongue. So where do I fit in this test? Quran has a test even for the non-Arabs. For people who don't know Arabic, everyone in the world, if they want to try and prove the Quran wrong, they can very well try the level best. I started my talk by quoting a verse from the Quran, from Surah Nisa, chapter number 4, verse number 82, which says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. That do not they consider the Quran with care, had it been from anyone besides Allah. That Islam is a ruthless religion. It is a merciless religion. It is a religion connected with terrorism. It is a religion which does not give rights to the woman. It's a religion which conflicts with science. And if he rejects Islam, I will tell him, I too reject such a religion, which is merciless, which is ruthless, which does not give rights to the woman, which is unscientific. At the same time, I have to correct the concept of Islam and tell him that Islam is a religion which is merciful. It has got nothing to do with terrorism. It gives equal rights to the woman. It does not conflict with science, it conciliates with science. Then, inshallah, the non-Muslims will accept the religion of Islam. It's our duty to correct the concept. In the same manner, I have to correct the concept of God Almighty, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the atheists. The best definition that I can give of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of God Almighty, from the Holy Quran, is Surah Ikhlas, chapter number 112, which says, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say He is Allah, one and only. Allahu Samad. Allah, the absolute and eternal. Meaning, He is absolute. He is eternal. He has no beginning, He has no end. He is the one who does not require any help. He does not require things to eat. He does not require sleep. He is the one who helps other people but does not require help. Allahu Samad. Allah, the absolute and eternal. Lam yalid walam yulad. He begets not, nor is begotten. He has got no father and mother. He has got no children, no begotten children. Walam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. And there is nothing unto Him like in this world. There is nothing comparable to Him in this world. The moment you can compare Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to anyone, He is not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَمْ يَقُلْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. This is a 4-line definition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If anyone who you claim to be God Almighty, who you claim to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fits in this 4-line definition, we Muslims, we have got no objection to accept him as God Almighty, to accept him as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What? Which are your candidates? Bring your candidates one by one. Some may say that Bhagwan Rajnish, oh show, he is God Almighty. Let's put him to test. The first criteria is, Qul huwa Allahu ahad. Say he is Allah one and only. Rajnish, we have several people like Rajnish. Prove to us scientifically the existence of God, then we will believe in it. The first thing I would like to ask a question to these atheists or any educated man who does not believe in a God and who believes only in science, that can you tell me the first person who will be able to tell you the mechanism of an unknown object? There is an object, an unknown object. an unknown machine which no one in the world has ever seen before or heard of before. Now this machine is brought in front of that atheist or that educated man who believes in science, that who will be the first person who will be able to tell you the mechanism of this unknown object. I've asked this question to hundreds of atheists. After a little bit of thinking, he replies, maybe the creator, the person who has created that object. Some may say the inventor. Some may say the manufacturer. Some may say the producer. Whatever they will say, believe me, it will be somewhat similar. Either the creator, the maker, the manufacturer, the inventor. I have asked this question to hundreds of atheists, and all have given me somewhat similar answer. Whatever answer they give me, I accept it. I only keep it in my mind. It will be somewhat similar. The next person may be the person who the creator has told, or maybe someone does a research. But the first person will be the creator, the manufacturer, the inventor, or the producer. I ask that atheist who believes in science, how did this world come into existence? How did our universe come into existence? So he tells me that initially the full universe was one mass, the primary nebula. Then there was a Big Bang, the secondary separation, which gave rise to galaxies, and then further stars and the planet in which we live. I asked him, where did you get all these fairy tales from? He said, no, these aren't fairy tales, these are established facts. We have got proof for this. I say, where did you learn? When did you learn all these fairy tales? He said, no, these are scientific facts. They aren't fairy tales. We learned it yesterday. Yesterday in science means 50 years back, maybe 100 years back, yesterday. And in 1973, a couple of scientists got the Nobel Prize for describing the Big Bang theory. So I tell him, okay, you say it is a fact, I accept it. But what do you have to say about what is mentioned in this Quran 1400 years ago? It mentions in Surah Al-Anbiya, chapter number 21, verse number 30. Awalam yara allazina kafaru. Do not the unbelievers see anna samawati wal arda kanat ratkan fafataknahuma, that the heavens and the earth were joined together and we reflected light. You say you discovered it today. How come it's mentioned in the Quran 1400 years ago? He will pause for a time. He won't reply immediately, and then may say, maybe it's a fluke. I don't argue with him. Just for the sake of the discussion, I say, okay, you say it's a guess. I don't argue with you. Let's proceed. I asked him that when I was in school, I passed my 10th standard in 1982. I had learned that the sun was stationary. The sun revolved, but it was stationary. So he asked me, does this what the Quran says? I said, no, this is what I learned in school. Is it true? He said, no. Today science is advanced. Recently we came to know that the sun, besides revolving, it also rotates. It is not stationary. It rotates about its axis. And if you have an equipment, you can have the image of the sun on a tabletop. The sun has got black spots, and it takes about 25 days for these black spots to complete one rotation. In short, the sun takes about 25 days to complete one rotation. Does the Quran say it is stationary? He starts laughing. Ha ha. I said, no. My Quran says in Surah Al-Anbiya, chapter number 21, verse number 33. هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ وَالشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. It is Allah who has created the night and the day, the sun and the moon, each one rotating about its own axis. It revolves and rotates, each one rotating about its own axis. You tell me, who could have mentioned this scientific fact in the Quran, which was discovered recently? He's silent. And after a long pause, he replies, let's see, the Arabs were very well advanced in the field of astronomy. So maybe some Arabs told your Prophet, and he mentioned this in his book. I do agree. I do agree that the Arabs were very well advanced in the field of astronomy. But I remind him that his dates are very poor. The Quran was revealed centuries before the Arab became advanced in the field of astronomy. So it is from the Quran which the Arabs learned about astronomy. It's not the vice versa. The Quran mentions about several scientific facts. The Quran says regarding the field of geography, regarding water cycle. It says in Surah Zumar, chapter number 39, verse number 21, that seest not thou that it is Allah who sends down rain from the top, from the sky, and leads it into the sources of the earth, and causes fields of various colors to grow. Quran speaks about the water cycle in great detail. It says in several other verses that the water from the ocean rises up, it forms into clouds. The clouds condense, there is lightning, and rain falls from the cloud. It's mentioned in several places in the Quran. It's mentioned in Surah Mu'minun, chapter number 23, verse number 18. It's mentioned in Surah Rum, chapter number 30, verse number 24. It's mentioned in Surah Nur, chapter number 24, verse number 43. It's mentioned in Surah Rum, chapter number 30, verse number 48. In several places the Quran describes in detail this water cycle, which was discovered by Bernard Palissy in 1580. Only in the year 1580 was this present coherent water cycle discovered. Who could have mentioned the Quran 1400 years ago? In the field of geology, that atheists will tell you, that there is a phenomena known as folding. The earth that we live on, the earth's crust is very thin. These mountain ranges, due to the phenomena of folding, prevent the earth from shaking. It gives stability to the earth. I tell him that the Quran mentions in Surah Nabah, chapter number 78, verse number 6 and 7, that we have made the earth as an expanse, وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا, and the mountains as stakes. The Quran says that the mountains are made as stakes, as pegs. And this is the description which the scientists give us today. That's like the tent pegs. The mountains are like tent pegs. And Quran gives more information in Surah Al-Anbiya, chapter number 21, verse number 31. It says that we have set on the earth mountains standing firm, lest it would shake. Quran says that we have made the mountain to prevent the shaking of the earth. That atheists will tell us that even though the salt water and the sweet water, though they meet, they do not mix and separate. I will point out to him a verse in the Quran from Surah Furqan, chapter number 25, verse number 53, which says, it is Allah who has created two bodies of free-flowing water, one sweet and palatable, and the other salt and bitter. And between them, He has made that which is forbidden to be trespassed. A similar message is given in Surah Rahman, chapter number 55, verse number 19 and 20, that He has made two bodies of water. Between them is a barrier which is forbidden to be trespassed. Today science tells us that salt water and sweet water do not mix. There is a partition. He may tell me that maybe some Arab went underwater and he saw the partition and mentioned in the Quran. They fail to realize that this is an unseen barrier. The Quran says barzakh, an unseen barrier that anyone will guess in the deserts of Arabia is water. But the Quran says that every living thing is made of water. In Surah Al-Anbiya, chapter number 21, verse number 30. It says in Surah Nur, chapter number 24, verse number 45, that every animal is made of water. And in Surah Furqan, chapter number 25, verse number 54, every human being is made of water. If you make a wild guess, the chances that you'll be right is 1 upon 10,000. The chances that if anyone makes 3 guesses, and all 3 will be right, that the earth is spherical, that the light of the moon is reflected light, and every living thing is made of water, will be 1 upon 30, into 1 upon 2, into 1 upon 10,000. It is 1 upon 60,000. It works out to 0.0017%. I leave it up to you, the audience, to decide for yourself that if you apply this theory of probability to the Quran mentions hundreds of facts which were unknown at that time. If anyone made a guess, the chances that all the hundreds will be right, it will be somewhere very, very close to 0, and in the theory of probability, it will be 0. Some may pose the question that, Zakir, are you using scientific knowledge to prove the Quran? I would like to remind them that Quran is not a book of science, S-C-I-E-N-C-E. It is a book of signs, S-I-G-N-S. Quran has got 6,000 signs, ayat, more than 6,000, out of which more than 1,000 have scientific knowledge. I am not using science to prove the Quran right, because to prove anything right, you have to use a yardstick. Something which is ultimate. For us Muslims, the ultimate is the Quran. Ultimate yardstick is the Quran. Quran is a Furqan. It is a criteria to judge right from wrong. But for that atheist, for an educated man who does not believe in God, for him, science is the ultimate. It is his yardstick. So I'm using his yardstick to prove whatever Quran has said. And we know very well that many a times science takes U-turns. Therefore, I have only spoken about scientific facts which have got evidence and proof. I have not talked about theories which are based on assumptions. I am using his yardstick to say that whatever your yardstick has said recently, 100 years back, it has already been mentioned in the Quran. And finally, it is also describing about the relationship, the family relations, in which many a time the female spider kills the male spider. The Quran says in Surah Namal, chapter number 27, verse number 17 and 18, that ants are talking to one another. You may think it's a fairy tale book. What? Ants are talking to one another? Today science tells us the insect or the animal which has the closest resemblance to the lifestyle of the human being is the ant. It buries the dead. It has a very high system of communication. It has marketplaces, etc. Quran also speaks about medicine. It says in Surah Nahl, chapter number 16, verse number 60 and 69, that you get the honey from the belly of the bee, which we discovered today. And in the honey, there is a healing for mankind. Today science tells us that in the honey, there are antiseptic properties. No wonder the Russian soldiers used it to cover their wound, which left very little scar tissue. It is used in the treatment of certain allergies. Quran speaks about physiology. It says in Surah Nahl, chapter number 16, verse number 66, and Surah Mu'minun, chapter number 23, verse number 21, it describes the blood circulation and the production of milk. And 600 years after the Quran speaks about blood circulation, Ibn Nafis discovered it. And 1,000 years after the revelation of the Quran, did William Harvey made it fit to the Western world. Quran speaks about embryology. The first verses of the Quran to be revealed were from Surah Alaq or Surah Iqra. It says, Iqra, Bismi Rabbika alladhi khalaq, Khalaq al-insana min alaq. Read, recite or proclaim in the name of thy Lord who created the human beings from something which clings, a leech-like substance. This and several other embryological data which is given in the Quran was taken to Professor Keith Moore, who happens to be one of the highest authority in the field of embryology. He lives in Toronto in Canada and was asked the question, whatever matter the Quran speaks about embryology, is it true? Some Arabs followed the guidance of the Quran. If you are in doubt, ask the person who knows. So they asked Professor Keith Moore, is it true? He said that majority